Meanwhile, the Senate Intelligence Committee report on Benghazi is causing a stir. It's giving Republicans new reason to shine a spotlight on what was a low point for Hillary Clinton at the State Department, with big implications, of course, for 2016. New Hampshire Senator Jeanne Shaheen joins me now from Capitol Hill. Senator, thank you very much. I know you're a strong supporter of Hillary Clinton's, and obviously New Hampshire is where it all starts, other than those caucuses in Iowa that New Hampshireans don't really take great notice of. So what is the impact of Benghazi? Don't we have to also take seriously the Republican criticism that there were plenty of warnings that Secretary Clinton and the people under her did not respond to this request for more security, and that there was a management failure at the State Department?
Well, I think this report reinforced what we've heard from the Accountability Review Board that reported back about a year ago, that made a number of recommendations and showed that there was a breakdown in communication, in security, and that people needed to be held accountable. I think the State Department is working through those recommendations, trying to address that. We need to address security at our embassies, particularly in places that are very high risk. At its core, this was a real human tragedy. We lost 4 Americans who were working hard for us overseas, and we need to make sure that the people who killed them are brought to justice. That's very important, and I think we need to continue that effort. And we need to go forward and address the recommendations that have been made and make sure that this does not happen again.
How much of a problem is this going to be for her if she chooses to run?
You know, I think we're going to see her continue to address this issue as she needs to, but I think most Americans are focused on what we need to do in the future, what the next president needs to do to keep this economy moving, to put people back to work, to ensure that we continue to have a place in the world where we are listened to in the international community. I think that's what Americans are going to be concerned about.
Where do you think she stands now? There's been the criticism of Benghazi. There's a mixed verdict from the Bob Gates book. Where does she stand against Joe Biden and others? According to the polls, she's the prohibitive favorite. Do you assume that she's going to be running?
I don't think we know that yet. Clearly, there are a lot of people working on her behalf who would like her to run. I hope she's going to consider it seriously. But one of the things that I've learned over the years is that each campaign is different. And the only conventional wisdom I have about what's going to happen in 2016 is that it's going to be different from 2012 and 2008 and all of the campaigns that came before it. So I think we have to wait and see what happens.
You praise Hillary Clinton. She was obviously a partner of yours, and both of you felt constrained and resentful of some of the interference by the national security team from the White House. But looking at the Benghazi experience, which happened, of course, after you left, and the harsh criticism of her role in not better managing the State Department and not responding to repeated requests from the field for better security, and then Ambassador Stevens twice rejecting suggestions from General Ham that the general provide more security for Benghazi. Many Republicans certainly are saying, and critics of Hillary Clinton are saying, that this really is disqualifying for someone who wants to be commander-in-chief if she chooses to run.
It seems to me that the critical questions are: what was offered to the ambassador? What did he reject? What did he ask for? And was it turned down? And if so, who turned it down and in what timeline? And did the question ever get to Hillary, or was the decision made by the undersecretary or the deputy secretary or somebody else?
On issues of security, you were the boss. Shouldn't the issue have gotten to the Secretary of State, as issues would get to the Secretary of Defense?
I think it depends on how much urgency there was in the requests from the ambassador, whether it was couched in terms that said, you know, this is something we're going to have to address at some point, or whether he said, I need people here now. And I just don't know the answer to that question.
That, of course, is former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates. In a wide-ranging interview earlier today, the Senate Intelligence Committee's report on Benghazi is a devastating indictment of the State Department under Hillary Clinton for ignoring hundreds of threat warnings in the month leading up to the attacks that killed 4 Americans, including Ambassador Chris Stevens, and not providing adequate security. Bottom line, they said the tragedy could have been prevented. Joining me now is Washington Post diplomatic correspondent Ann Gearan. And you've gone through the report and written on it. The State Department still has not disciplined anyone who was involved, and some of these are veteran career people. What is your takeaway as to how culpable the State Department versus the CIA and other agencies are after reading all of these reports?
Yeah, this report in particular spreads the blame farther than the State Department, but the State Department really, takes the brunt of their criticism and is the recipient of most of the recommendations. There are 14 findings in this report generally support the narrative that is pretty well known now as far as what actually happened that night and early the next morning, and the degree of confusion and problems in figuring out afterward what had happened. It really does, however, come down hard on the State Department in particular for not so much ignoring warnings of rising violence and instability in Benghazi as sort of a failure to communicate with the intelligence community located only a mile away, and to have a plan of what they were going to do as the situation worsened. The report says there were tripwires in place, at least on paper, certain things that the department should have done and didn't in the crucial weeks and couple months leading up to the attack.
Now, the report does say that there had been warnings that militias and terrorists and affiliated groups had the capability and intent to strike U.S. and Western facilities and personnel in Libya that were ignored. That included the British ambassador and others who had cleared out for that precise reason, and that the CIA annex a mile away had beefed up its security, that the diplomatic mission had not, that General Ham had twice offered more security to Ambassador Stevens, and he had rejected it. But Hillary Clinton is not criticized personally except by the Republicans in their dissenting part of the report. They go after her very, very roughly, and today on the floor as well, on the Senate floor. And Dianne Feinstein, the chair, has now issued a statement saying that that is unfair, that in the part of the report that is bipartisan, it does not go after Hillary Clinton personally.
That's the crux of your question to Bob Gates. I mean, is the person at the top automatically responsible, automatically culpable? Buck stops here, and so forth. And as he said, it really depends on the nature of those requests and who denied them. And in there, he's talking specifically about those requests from Stevens back to headquarters in Washington, saying, hey, I do need this and that. But when offered directly by the senior Pentagon official in charge of that region, Carter Ham, do you want an extension of this separate security force? Now, mind you, that was in Tripoli, not in Benghazi. He said, no, I don't. And in fact, Ham went back to him, and he still said, no, I don't want it. And so I think the real question of whether Hillary Clinton is to blame, falls on, is that the sort of thing that should have come to her attention? Should she have been asking more questions about, hey, we've got some really bad stuff going on here in eastern Libya. Is Chris Stevens going to be okay?
And there is question as to why he went to Benghazi and how, given all of the warnings, how smart that mission was. And I think a lot of it was personal, that he had been in Benghazi for a year during the war and really felt that he could rely on the locals, contrary to a lot of intelligence that showed that they had strong connections with Al-Qaeda, at least Al-Qaeda-influenced groups.
Yeah, this report goes farther than others in gently laying some of the blame on Chris Stevens himself. That he wanted to operate with a lighter security footprint, as they say, and he did want to rely on locals, and he didn't want to walk into every meeting with 6 guys with guns. He just thought that was the wrong way to operate, and that was probably behind some of the decisions he made about going there at all and not taking much security with him when he did.
Ann Guerin, thanks for the deep dive. Appreciate it. Always good to see you.
Thank you.